What's up? Let's start with the elephant in the room. Why should you buy a counterfeit controller? Starting with the pros, counterfeits are cheaper than legitimate controllers. The controller I have here, I bought for only $46 on Amazon, and it's a counterfeit. This controller I bought for $70. So, let me do the math, $24 savings if you choose to buy that counterfeit controller that I showed. And sometimes it can be more. People have said, and I have seen myself, counterfeit controller listings going as low as $30. Next pro. Despite it being a counterfeit, the controller can work as well as a legitimate controller. On YouTube, there are videos of people playing with counterfeit controllers and demonstrating that they work as well as a legitimate controller. As a matter of fact, this counterfeit here that I have, I was able to play Tekken reasonably with it. Now for the cons. Usually when you buy a counterfeit controller, you're buying it from a shady third-party seller on online platforms such as eBay or Amazon. And when you encounter an issue with the counterfeit controller, which you most likely will, you're going to have a hard time getting a refund or even getting any communication at all from the seller. But if you are buying a legitimate controller, you are usually buying it from a retailer such as Newegg or Amazon, and the customer service from those retailers is usually good enough where they'll refund your purchase or replace your defective product if you encounter an issue with your controller. Next con. The counterfeit controller might not work as well as the legitimate controller, or not at all. I had a previous encounter with a counterfeit controller where the D-pad felt very mushy and I was not getting any tactile feedback from pressing on a D-pad. Whereas with this legitimate D-pad that I'm holding here, when I press on the D-pad, I can get some feedback when I press on the D-pad. This counterfeit DualShock 4 that I'm holding here, the analog sticks are defective. When I tested Fall Guys with this controller, my character would randomly stop when I was moving him. And additionally, there are accounts on the internet of counterfeit controllers with battery life at less than an hour when unplugged. And additionally, there are claims that some of the counterfeits have trouble syncing with Steam or even a PS4. I had a previous counterfeit controller where the LED lighting on the back wouldn't change with Steam. Alright, so you don't want to get scammed by a counterfeit. How do you do so? Buy from a reputable seller. Like, go to your local retailer like Target or Best Buy and buy it in person. If you are shopping online, make sure the order is fulfilled by the website such as Amazon or Newegg. If you want to buy from a third-party seller on an online platform, at least check their profile for their location and feedback. Some of the sellers even have their physical storefronts that you can look up on Google. And if you are shopping from eBay, check the listing for a packaging picture and make sure the packaging looks legit, like this. Let's go over the differences between the counterfeit and legitimate DualShock 4s. Starting with the packaging, on the counterfeit, you'll see they have these PlayStation graphics on the top, whereas with the legitimate packaging, there are no PlayStation graphics on the top. Another package for proof. The PS4 logo, or is written to the side on the illegitimate packaging, and seemingly this design choice is a recurring theme for the counterfeit listings on online websites. On legitimate packaging, the PS4 text is on the center of the package. And on the illegitimate packaging, you'll see mismatching fonts. So here you can see that the PS4 text is different than the wireless controller text. And same goes for the back. Excuse the poor camera, but you can see that the description text is different than the top text. And then on a legitimate controller, the text is matching font, and there are no seemingly obvious font mistakes on the back either. And something I just discovered is that this counterfeit packaging that I have here has a glossy finish, and you can see my desktop reflected on the packaging. With the legitimate packaging, it's less glossy, and as a matter of fact, you can feel that it's less glossy. And my desktop is less reflected by the packaging. And on the bottom of the box, the legitimate packaging will have stickers on the bottom of the box indicating the model number and the color of the DualShock 4. Whereas this counterfeit packaging does not have a sticker at the bottom indicating the color or model of the controller. And I also forgot to mention that the counterfeit packaging will also have typos. So it's hard to see on this camera, but in this bottom description text, the PS4 text is mistyped. There's a space between the S and the 4. And there's also a model number difference. So the listing I bought this counterfeit from on Amazon had the model number listed as CUHZCT2U, which is the model number of these legitimate DualShock 4. And I assume or guess that that's a model number for North American DualShock 4s. This counterfeit packaging has the model number listed as CUHZCT2E, even though the listing on Amazon had a listing as CUHZCT2U. And I did some digging, and apparently this model number belongs to a South African DualShock 4 manual. So, I bought this from a North American seller, and so I'm not sure how they arrived at a South African model number, even though the model number on their listing had a North American model number. So moving on to the internal differences, let's open this counterfeit. And right off the bat, there's a USB cable in this counterfeit, even though the packaging says a USB cable is not included. Again, hard to see with my camera. Manual. This manual is actually folded differently than the legitimate controllers, and this manual also has the CUH ZCT2E number on it. So on the legitimate packaging, the manuals are folded up this way, and it has the actual correct model number. It also comes out nicer. Feels less cheap than a counterfeit as well. Another legitimate packaging. Again, the manual is folded up this way. For the record, my DualShock 4s, these legitimate ones, have modified D-pads. These are Battle Beaver D-pads, but the weights and functionality is mostly the same as the original D-pads. So a trick I learned on YouTube is that you can see a weight difference between the legitimate and counterfeit DualShock 4s. Get this counterfeit out. So the legitimate DualShock 4 weighs, this one 219 grams, and this one pretty close, 217 grams. In the videos I've seen on YouTube, the legitimate DualShock 4s usually come in between 215 and 220 grams. You know, the variation is likely due to manufacturing imprecision. The counterfeit DualShock 4s feel lighter and actually weigh the difference. So this counterfeit weighs 198 grams, and if you look around the internet, it's a recurring theme that the counterfeit DualShock 4s weigh about 20 grams less than the, or 20 to 15 grams less than the legitimate DualShock 4s. And there's this, I don't know why they included it, but this counterfeit DualShock 4 has a film on the touchpad that you can remove. I don't know the reasoning behind that design choice. Oh, look at that. So here's the legitimate crystal DualShock 4, and the back sticker is a white sticker, whereas this counterfeit DualShock 4 has a black sticker. And on this counterfeit DualShock 4, you can actually see typos on the label of the back. Hard to see with this camera, but there's no space between computer and entertainment. The legitimate DualShock 4 has, instead of saying Sony Computer Entertainment, the legitimate DualShock 4s say Sony Interactive Entertainment. At least for these generation of DualShock 4s. So let's open this counterfeit and see what's the difference between the internals. You don't need a go overboard with something like an iFixit toolkit, but most small screwdrivers will do for opening these DualShock 4s. Let's grab this one and this one. So a head of about this small should do for accessing the screws on the counterfeit, on the DualShock 4s. Well, the nice thing about the iFixit toolkit is that they have these plastic wedges which you can use to safely open the DualShock 4s. Again, you don't need these plastic wedges, but they're nice for preventing you from breaking the plastic inside the controllers. Like this legitimate DualShock 4, I've broke some of the plastic snap hinges when I was trying to open it up. So let's open up this counterfeit. One. I should find somewhere to put these screws. I'll put them in here. Two. These screws also come off easier than the legitimate DualShock 4s. Maybe it's because these counterfeit DualShock 4s are made in the same factory as the legitimate DualShock 4s, but the manufacturing is has less quality control than the legitimates. Alright, so let's open this guy up. Wow, this came off easy. Oh, hold up. Oops. Press the on button. Yeah, you keep lighting up, buddy, but there's no DualShock PlayStation 4 nearby. So if this counterfeit is anything like the legitimate DualShock 4, it should have hinges on this part of the controller and on this part of the controller by the USB port. So on this side of the controller, I'm going to try to open up and get that plastic snap hinge off. Oh, come on, man. Yep, it's still as hard as opening as a legitimate DualShock 4. Oh, that came off way too easy. No, look at that, I broke the plastic. Sorry about that, my audio cut out when I was unscrewing the screws and opening my legitimate DualShock 4. So let's compare the internals of these controllers. So here's an illegitimate one. So right off the bat, the cables connecting the LED lighting to the motherboard have different lengths. So this counterfeit controller has a longer USB cable, and this legitimate controller has a shorter USB cable. Additionally, batteries are seemingly different. So this counterfeit has this blue tape on it, and this legitimate controller has this regular battery. And I've opened several legitimate DualShock 4s, and the batteries are mostly the same design as this, a square brick, with no tape. So let's unhook these cables. So let's undo this one. So let's pop this off. Let's unhook these batteries. Whew. Just gotta wiggle this battery out. This counterfeit battery is much harder to remove than the legitimate battery I have. Come on, man, what kind of motherboard is this? There you go. Alright, of course this battery's taped on to the battery case, like the legitimate one. Oh, would you look at that? So this counterfeit has a thinner battery than the legitimate DualShock 4 battery. That probably explains the weight difference. Look at the difference. So, counterfeit, legitimate battery. This probably explains why people are reporting that these counterfeits have a shorter battery life. I don't feel like undoing this tape, but I'm pretty sure it's hiding a different spec on this counterfeit's battery. And sneaky guys, they have some double-sided tape here on this counterfeit. Meet the height of the legitimate battery. And of course the motherboard is different. So on this counterfeit motherboard, the battery ports and the cable port for the LED lighting is on different sides compared to the legitimate DualShock 4. On every DualShock 4, there's a screw connecting the battery case and the motherboard to the front plate, front shell. Let's unscrew that. Good old magnetic screwdriver. Well, there's one reason to buy an iFixit tool kit. The screwdriver's heads are magnetic. Uh-oh. So this counterfeit battery screw doesn't come out. It unwinds, but it's stuck in the motherboard. That's maybe they cheaped out on screws with the counterfeits. So I'll remove the battery case of this legitimate controller. So this counterfeit DualShock 4 seemingly uses a old generation battery case. So I've opened an older DualShock 4, and this was the battery case they had. It's much more annoying to remove because on the side of these battery case there is some hinges which hold the battery case in place with the motherboard. So let me get some tweezers out and undo the plastic pieces that are holding this battery case to the motherboard. It's hard to see with this camera, but right about crap. Right about in this spot right there is a hinge which connects this battery case to the motherboard. And same for the other side. Oops. So let me undo this hinge. So on every DualShock 4, you're gonna have a cable connecting the touchpad to the motherboard. So let's undo that. Oh, and would you look at that? So this Counterfeit Dualshock 4 uses a old generation connection. So it's hard to see with this camera, but this Counterfeit controller's motherboard is using a snap mechanism to hold the cable. And look at that. So on this legitimate motherboard, there's a PlayStation 4 PlayStation logo. Hard to see with this camera, but right there is the PlayStation logo. The Counterfeit does not have a PlayStation logo etched on it. And would you look at that? The soldering job on this Counterfeit motherboard is bad or non-existent. So this might explain why this analog stick on this Counterfeit doesn't work. So if you look at the legitimate motherboard, the solder, you can clearly see even on this bad camera that it's on and connecting the parts to the motherboard, like the analog sticks here. On this Counterfeit, looks like they did a very, very bad job of soldering or not soldering the analog stick to the motherboard. Undo that hinge. This cable comes off easily once you undo that hinge. Cable goes down. Motherboard comes off. Ooh. Come on, man. Come on, buddy. The hell? There we go. Oh. So here's the front of our Counterfeit. And the back of our Counterfeit's motherboard. That's weird. So this touchpad still has tape on it. And the silicone contact pads look okay. Maybe so these silicone contact pads don't seem much different than the legitimate contact pads. Again, lending credit to the theory that these Counterfeits are made in the same factory as legitimate controllers, but with less quality control and maybe cheaper parts, like the batteries here. Let's undo this legitimate controller. Okay, let's get this cable out the way. Alright, so right off the bat, on this legitimate controller, we have these two plastic pieces which hold a motherboard onto the front shells. Plastic pieces here. And the touchpad, look at that, the touchpad color is different too. So, on a Counterfeit here, on my left hand, the touchpad is a gray color, whereas the legitimate controller has a black touchpad. Weird choice. As you can see, the parts, despite their differences, are similar, but the differences are probably explain why the Counterfeit controllers work worse than the legitimate controllers. There's probably some more differences that I haven't covered or missed. But you guys are free to buy these counterfeits at your own risk and discover for yourself the differences. So yeah, that's it for the video.